Hey everybody, it's Robot Corn. Today I'm going to refurbish the board and the power supply unit in an Xbox. The first steps, of course, is taking it apart. I'll leave that for another video. But once we get the board and the power supply unit taken out of the unit itself, then we have some light soldering that we need to do, also some cleaning. So that's why I have the alcohol and the WD-40 for cleaning. We're also going to redo the paste. Any good refurb is going to have new thermal paste or new thermal compound. I used the Arctic MX4. I'm going to pull those heat sinks off, clean them up really good, put new thermal paste on there so we can get better temperatures. So that's our supplies for the day. I also have the, not pictured I guess, is the brush. It's helpful for cleaning out the fans and then the board, the nooks and crannies in the board. We also got good old Q-tips, right? So I'm just going to get started, and I'll try to detail each step as I'm going along. But when I call something refurbished, I like to be as thorough as possible, just to make sure it holds up. It's going to last, right? These units are, in some cases, 15 years old. So they're getting pretty far along in their life cycle. I already started taking some of the screws out. So there was one right here on the power supply, one right here. Then you just want to grab the clip. This unit looks like it's a 1.2. It's actually going out for an order for somebody who requested a 1.2. So I'll send this video to them to show them the process. So after you disconnect all the screws, depending on the power supply you have, it's good to check all the caps, all the capacitors, right? So they're concave or convex, depending on if they're good or not. So if they're sitting in and you get a nice cross on them still and they're not popped up, you know they're still good and nothing's loose. All this is normal. All that white glue on the board is normal. You can see the glue in several places. You have the glue just kind of built up around things. That's absolutely normal. That's just the manufacturer putting that down to keep those components from moving. Everything even at an angle. All of these look nice and flat. Then you flip it over to check the main solder points where the AC power comes in. All the jostling that this happens causes metal fatigue on these at times, especially on the Fox link, and they start to short out, and that's where the source of fires came. That's why they started handing out those breakers in the AC power cords. I don't really have one to show. Wait, maybe I do. I'll be right back. Yeah, it was this one that they started handing out because of the failures of the power supply. It actually has a breaker in it, just kind of like a reset switch. But I'll actually send this one out with this unit. So anyway, power supply actually looks good. We're just going to clean it up. I'll vacuum it up. I'll actually save the vacuuming for the most part for not on video, because it's really loud and annoying on the videos. So, but I will vacuum this up, and that's where the brush comes in handy, because I use the brush to get in all the nooks and crannies and then vacuum it out. You can see the dust already kicking up from it. I'm going to activate my allergies, so I'm going to put that to the side. So I'm going to finish taking the screws out of the board here. Probably should have done this sooner, but I guess I could detail the steps that I'm going to take on a refurb as well, other than the board. So today I'm pulling the board so I can pull the heat sinks off, and then of course clean all the board. I'm going to clean the fan out as well. I'm going to pop this out. I'll save that for another video though. That's pretty straightforward. You just disconnect it. Use some pry tools. I'll save that for the tear down. But once you tear it out, I use the brush the paintbrush to actually kind of like brush it and vacuum it at the same time, get it brushed out. There's some lubrications that you can get, but for the most part, the fan, if it's quiet and running and you clean it out, you should extend its life without having to put lubrication on it. So other than that, of course, cleaning the case up, pull the faceplate off to make sure that you get the area in here where the vents are nice and clean. And then some people like to have LEDs added to the ports, but I'm not going to do any of that today. Some people want just the classic Xbox restored, so we'll clean that out. I'll clean all of this out with the brush and vacuum, sort of off camera here. It's not really making for good videos with loud vacuums. I might run it for a short instant just to get the board clean, but as far as the board refurbishing process, the main thing we want to do is pull the clock cap. You can see that the clock cap has residue around it. So if you look in this general area, you can see the clock cap, and it has some sticky residue around it. This one may have not been leaking. It actually has a blue mark on it, which it may have been replaced, I don't know, but it's not leaking now. But we don't want to take any chances since it's the most notorious failure in these units, so we're just going to pull it by desoldering it. And I already got my soldering gun heating up, so I'm going to pull the helping hand over. I'm just going to flip it over to the area where the... So if you kind of look, if you're going to do this yourself, you kind of look, and I just kind of pinch my fingers so they kind of line up, because there's obviously just two spots right here. Then underneath, there's really nothing else that could be the cap of that size. Here's another cap, here's one, and that's the one that lines up with my fingers. You can measure it off if you need to. But this one, I have those two prongs that are coming through right here. I'm just going to set that on the helping hand. Bring it in frame here. Let me set up the helping hand first, and then I'll bring it in frame. Actually, the magnifier is not going to help me today because I got to actually reach under. So here's what I'm shooting for right here. So these are the first part that I found. Is you want to make sure that the legs that come through, the little metal legs that come through, that are nice and straight. So you can actually use your pry tool or some pliers to kind of just straighten them out so they'll pull straight through, because once you heat these up and wiggle from behind, you want them to pull straight through. So I also like to get a Q-tip get it saturated with alcohol and just do like a preliminary cleaning of the area, getting residue off to allow for my flux or my solder to activate. And then you can just reach through with your hand. And it's kind of a tight spot for my fingers, so I just kind of use my finger to pry it one way, and then it kind of slips the prong out, and then I push it back the other way and it slips the other one out, and then kind of repeat back and forth as they pull through, and then eventually you can grab it. So I got my iron all heated up. I'm actually just going to pop just the tiniest amount of new solder on there to activate that old solder. Just a little bit to help with to reactivate that. So that one pulled through almost immediately. And using fresh solder also closes that hole up pretty well. So I'm just going back and forth, back and forth. It's a nice clean extraction. Okay, you can see the new solder kind of pulled in with it and kind of acted like a lubricant to pull it through. So now I got both of these. Make sure that I don't leave any solder on the board. I got both of these straightened out. Those look pretty good. So that's how you pull that clock cap. You can see what's left now on the other side. Looks pretty clean. The board actually looks like it wasn't leaking. There was no electrolyte, so this guy was right there. We pulled it through. The holes are pretty sealed. Let's see if I could zoom in a little bit more. I need a better camera. My camera has a hard time focusing when I get too tight, so that's not going to work. That's probably as tight as we're going to be able to get with that. Yeah, it's kind of a bummer, but that's a pretty clear picture of what we're going for though. So you can kind of see the two holes are pulled through nice and clean. Now I'm just going to clean that area up with alcohol. And of course brush it all off. So I like to use my brush first to brush everything off and to get underneath the caps and get all the dust out. And I use it in conjunction with my vacuum to kind of suck the dirt away. I'm actually going to turn my vacuum on really fast. So excuse the noise here. Sorry about that, I have terrible allergies. So now I just kind of brush everything. There's still some residual dust, but I'm going to move it off my workbench and just do it on the floor. Alright, so we got that done. The board nice and dusted anyway. Now we're just going to take alcohol to it. It's pretty tedious, but before we do that, let's take the two heat sinks off. So this one comes off pretty easily. And you remember the orientation, so the clamp actually opens from this side. You remember that. I mean, they only go on one way, so it's kind of straightforward when you're putting it back together. But I usually just pop this in and then spin it so it opens it up a little bit. And then you can pop it right off. This one usually comes off easily enough. So we got the pink paste. And I'm going to set this off to the side on a paper towel and just spray some WD-40 on it. So I just set it up like this and then take the other one off as well. This one, same thing, you just kind of pop in and pull it, comes right off. These are really brittle, so you have to be careful. You'll break them right in half, right? So this one, the unit was running for a while, which is recommended. If you run the unit for a while, it'll loosen up the paste, and then you can kind of test it to see if it spins. And then I usually just pop my pry tool right on the corner and gently push up. It's already kind of loose, so if you gently push up, it'll break that seal, and then you can just kind of peel it right off. So it was running for about 10 minutes. I just kind of let it run. I was actually doing a soft mod on it, so I let it kind of run. So I'm going to set that off to the side. Then I pull out the WD-40, right? Just amazing cleaning compound. I believe it's inert, so any residue won't harm anything. Then I just drip some on the unit, kind of spray it down so it doesn't get on my workbench here. But these two I'm going to set off to the side and let them soak while I'm doing everything else. I actually should have did that sooner, give them more time to soak. And then this area we're going to clean up. Never use the metal scraping. You don't want to score any of that. Use the plastic scraper to get all that off. And you can put some WD-40 or some alcohol on that to soften it up. I'm actually going to start cleaning everything with some alcohol, just to make sure I get any residue off, any electrolyte that may have leaked. Take one last look at those caps before I seal this up. I'm especially focused in on this area because it does look like there was a slight leak. So let me zoom in on that. I kind of cleaned it up already, but you can see my Q-tip has a little bit of residue. I believe what happens, and I could be wrong, and I'm always okay with being challenged if I'm wrong, but I believe what happened is that the electrolyte leaks and then the dust starts to collect on the electrolyte and it forms a highly acidic mixture, and then that's what starts eating through the board. So you'll see like a brown paste kind of forming on the board and start forming on the silver connections here, which causes problems and failures, and that's how these units die, is they get trace rot, and it kind of just eats through. But as far as the refurbishing, and the reason why I'm making this video, one of the main reasons is because when I call something refurbished, I want people to understand that I take it seriously. I wouldn't send something out that I don't 100% feel like I did put the most effort in to actually restore the unit. That way we can enjoy the Xbox and the game library of the Xbox. There's some really awesome titles, right, for many years to come. So this part's tedious and it's probably not even worth filming, but just 90% rubbing alcohol. I'm just getting as much of the dust off as I can. Now I'm working on the processor area, CPU, GPU. They're kind of dirty in there. There's enough of a space under here that dust actually got in there. So I'm actually going to, after I'm done cleaning the board, and the board actually looks pretty good. I'm going section by section, just kind of looking for trouble spots. I don't see anything, nothing's loose, nothing looks damaged. Processor looks good. I know this unit worked already. So a little quadrant by quadrant search here to make sure everything looks good. Get that layer of film off there. Every area. So this looks good, especially the clock cap area. Now it's nice and clean. Holes are sealed. Not crucial for operation, so we'll just leave it off. No need to redo it. So here we go with the little WD-40. Wish my spray can had more precise control. I don't want to put too much. I'll grab the Q-tip just in case, right? And it only needs to sit for even just a minute, because it starts to dissolve that old compound almost immediately. So the compound then can be scraped off pretty easily. I always start with this side because this one usually just sticks around the ends. Use my plastic scraping tool. Clear that up so I can start fresh with the Arctic MX. There's some ceramic one too that I'll probably start using, but the Arctic hasn't let me down. Especially with those long gaming sessions, you want these to stay nice and cool. So yeah, the Arctic hasn't let me down. I've used it on PS3s, Xboxes. It's been my go-to for a while, but I'm always open to suggestions if someone knows something better. So as far as I know about the WD-40, why I chose that is because not only does it get it clean, it feels like, and I could be wrong, but it feels like it conditions the plastic as well. So alcohol is good for cleaning. I mean, alcohol pretty much dissolves anything that you put it on there, as far as like paste and stuff like that. It won't dissolve the board, of course. So I'm actually using some alcohol behind it. But the WD-40, it feels like it wipes away clean, doesn't leave any residue behind, except for you can feel that the plastic with alcohol you feel the plastic kind of dry out, and with WD-40 it actually feels like the residue behind, or not really residue, I just said it doesn't leave a residue, right? Well, maybe it does, I guess. Let's change that. I'll retract that statement. So what it leaves behind is it feels like it softens the plastic, and I've tested it like on the top of a case, and I've cleaned the case off with some alcohol, and it leaves like a dry, white, powdery look because it's so clean and dry after you use the alcohol. But then when you use the WD-40, if you wipe away the slick part of the residue, I guess is what I should say, and then it just leaves a conditioned look. So obviously there's something left behind because it looks conditioned, it looks moistened, and plastic being what it is, petroleum based, right? It may be, I don't know if my science is good here. I'm just kind of shooting from the hip with that, but it seems like it kind of adds some much needed moisture to these old plastics. So that's why I use WD-40 in cleaning and sorting out these units. I could be wrong. I'm not gonna sit here and pretend I'm the authority on all of this. I'm just learning this process as I go along, and I do this because it's cathartic. It just eases my mind. It's a hobby. I have fun with it, and then I also love gaming, so restoring units, sending them out to folks who enjoy gaming as much as I do. It truly is relaxing. I never even thought to film it until recently, but then when I was looking for instructional videos, I found there's two types of videos. There's, well, from what I looked at, some people make really succinct videos that are helpful with information overall. It's like an overview, and then they zoom through everything and jump through, and it's like a 30-second video, instructional, that shows the process, maybe add some text content to help. But I found that those videos left me with more questions about the nuance, I guess, the in-between steps, right? And I know the step one, hey, get the paste off, put some cleaning compound, but I actually like to see it done and have it as detailed as possible, because I found myself searching more and more for the intricacies, I guess. So that's why I started making videos, because my videos, I vowed to just leave them as raw as possible. Try to make them as short as possible too, and have good content, but I also want to detail all the steps so you can follow along, kind of watch what I'm doing as it's happening, and see that I'm as thorough as possible. So that one's looking good. And some of those, I can see on the camera that there's like some white shining. Some of it is actually still residue that's kind of hard to get off. I'm more worried about the top of the processor here, the GPU here, just get it nice and clean so we can create a nice tight bond. So I'm getting a completely dry end now and getting everything that's left. of the WD-40. So there we go. That part's done. This part looks good. So I'm going to zoom back out. Applying the paste is pretty straightforward. I don't know if there's an exact science to it. There might be. But actually we're not ready for the paste. We gotta, almost forgot these guys, right? So let's zoom back in. This one's pretty straightforward. They've been sitting for a while I've been running my mouth, right? So this one, they pretty much, if you let it sit long enough, it dissolves it well enough to where it turns from a hard gummy substance to a almost liquid, more liquid paste than anything. And then you can just kind of push it around and scrape it off. I always use my plastic scraper so I don't score this metal, because I know how scored metal, you kind of change its ability to absorb heat, I guess. If you score it, it might cause issue with like a little fissure in the metal. But man, WD-40 works really well. Well, it's not like a commercial for WD-40, right? But for cleaning, it seems to work really well. There might be some other compounds out there, but I've experimented with different things. So now I just take that and wipe it down. That one has some, I wouldn't say those are scores, those are more, well, they're probably really light scores from the plastic, which is kind of strange. That metal's really soft, right? It must be really soft. But that plastic score, stain, whatever, but it's still pretty smooth to the touch. Looks like those are more just stained, but I mean, even the softest metal can be scratched with plastic, I suppose. So now I have those clean. I'm going to put the board back together. That's pretty straightforward. You just drop some of this on. So let's cover the steps now. So we pulled the clock cap, cleaned the board, brushed it off the best we could, right? Make sure everything's out of there. I can see some thermal paste right there. We'll take one last look. So I got alcohol on one side, dry edge on the other. And area is nice and clean. This one's nice and clean. No dust. No old compound. So that looks pretty good. So now we're going to go ahead and reapply the new paste. So for this, I know you don't want to use too much because it's just going to push down and create a thin layer of conductive paste to transfer the heat into the heatsink, and then the heatsink will radiate it out into the open air, if you will, of the internal of the Xbox. And when it radiates out, and the fan then pushes it out. So, and as far as the science of putting the thermal paste on, I just make sure that there's enough to coat it. Kind of use my best estimate onto how much is going to be pushed out when it's squished. I don't put it all the way to the end, but I leave a thin enough layer so I know it's going to have a buffer between the chip and the heatsink, but also not push out over the sides and get all over the board. So both of those look about where I usually put them, and I haven't had issues, so there might be a better formula to do that. So now I'm just gonna do one final brushing. So the brush works really good for getting in those cracks, or those heatsink, getting leftover dust bunnies out of there, right? Man, it's allergy season. So I got enough on there. I'm going to just drop that on there. Then you remember this one opened from this way, so we're just going to pop that back down. And then this one you just pop it straight on too, straight as possible. So then we just pop these back down. Try not to wiggle them too much. You don't want that paste all over the place. We got this one too. It only goes on one way, so it's kind of hard to mess up. So you kind of just pop that one in, drop it down. There you go. So that is what we call a refurbished unit. Now I'm just going to reassemble it. Of course, there's some cleaning and vacuuming of the fans and the PSU. Excuse me. That I mentioned I was going to do. Sorry, that's the dust. I mentioned I was going to do that, but this board 100% done in my opinion. Of course you can T-sop it and stuff like that, but that's the refurbishment process. All the caps are good. I've checked them all. These can be pulled and replaced, but these ones all look good. So I call that 100% good refurbished board. So if you have any questions, feel free to leave me any comments, and thanks for watching. I hope I've been helpful. Again, I'm Robot Corn. If you can, like and subscribe to my videos or my channel to kind of help me out with my side project that I'm doing here about refurbishing stuff. So thanks again for watching. Have a good day.